Well, Leon,
You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is September 23rd, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest. He's back with us after being on the show now, I think, 3 times, I think. So you've been a great guest back and forth to find out what's going on in the presidential run, Mike. And so this is Mike ter Maat. He was the presidential contender there for the Libertarian Party, and now he is part of the ticket with Chase Oliver. He is the vice presidential candidate on the ticket. So we're going to find out how the campaign is going and talk about some AI related stuff during the show as well, especially with some of the recent laws signed into place, and also to touch back on a chat box that Mike developed called Lisa. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have Mike ter Maat, our special guest today. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So as I mentioned before, we had a few other episodes with Mike on, and so we're not going to get into his complete background because you can check out some of those other episodes that we've done in the past and find out all about his journey into liberty and some of the many. I mean, he's been a police officer, he's been an economist, he's worked in an economist in the Bush administration, right? So you've had quite a long past and have a lot of interesting knowledge to bring to the into politics and into the White House, if you guys are so lucky. So anyways, let's bring up the we always start off the show with a Liberty quote. So before we get into any more, let's bring up a quote to set the stage. And this time we have to go all the way back to ancient Rome for this quote. And so this is Marcus Tullius Cicero. And you might just know him as Cicero. And the quote is, "The more laws, the less justice." And I think this guy was a libertarian before people knew anything about libertarians. Because you can see this is 106 BC is when this guy was born. So, and he recognized at that time in the Empire of Rome that too many laws actually made things kind of complicated and people stopped really understanding their rights. And I thought that's a hell of an insight to have back in those days. And of course, Rome fell in a similar way that, we're kind of seeing things starting to happen here where the currency became debased and all kinds of crazy issues, endless foreign wars. And anyways, so what do you guys think about this quote? I think it's just absolutely astounding.
A lot of parallels to today. I think he's absolutely got it right, not only from the standpoint of complexity that you mentioned, but also just, the government thinking that its job is to make laws and keep, persisting at this idea of intruding into your life. It's a matter of not just making the laws more complex, but finding new ways to insert itself into how you live your life, how you run your business, how the economy works. And it's very much the way things work today.
Yeah, that quote is so true and so poignant to the point. Somebody wrote a book. This is not one of my original thoughts. Somebody wrote a book that said that the average American is probably committing 3 felonies a day, and most of the times we don't even know it. I mean, it's kind of scary when you think about this, that at any point in time, the government, particularly the federal government, well, in our case, being in California, the state government too, at any point in time, they could arrest you for something you have done wrong, and many times you don't even know that you're committing a crime. Now, this is a scary thought when we are supposed
Leon,
to.
I think you're exactly right. At least as a former police officer, I know it.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm preaching to the choir then. But yes, yeah. I mean, when we live in a society that is supposed to be founded upon the whole principles of freedom and liberty and all that, and you could say the federal government can come knocking at your doors, stop you in your vehicle at any point in time because you have committed some crime, and most of the times you don't even know what the crime is.
Yeah, and it's funny too. We just had a Supreme Court justice write a book. I think it was called "Overruled: The High
Yes,
Cost of the Human Cost of Too Many Laws," something like that. I can't
yes.
remember exact, but exactly touching on this point, the fact that all these people were being regulated to death, and that they didn't even know they were often in violations, and it made huge impacts in their life. So, anyways, it's
No, you're
definitely
exactly right. As a matter of fact, Jason, I just opened moments ago before coming on your show, a letter from the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is where I live, telling me that I owed them a couple of $100 more in taxes than what I had calculated. And to be honest, I don't have any idea whether I actually made the mistake that they claim I did or whether they have. I have gone to battle with the federal IRS in the past and won, and it took 2.5 years, but it was over what was to me a tremendous amount of money. I mean, more than dozens of thousands of dollars. Let's put it that way. And I had no choice, it was that or I was going to lose my house. So I had to go to war with them. And as I expected, I won, but mostly because I exhausted them, not because they finally realized that they were wrong. And, it's funny in this particular case, I'm just going to give them the money, right? I'm just going to give them the extra couple $100 they want because it is a shame. It's not worth it. And then on the other hand, I'm in a running argument at the moment with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. They are asking for personal financial disclosure. This is not quite the same thing as campaign finance disclosure. Campaign finance laws mean you have to disclose, who your donors are and what you spend on the campaign. This is a little bit different. The FEC wants information on me personally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have filed forms in the past. I've run for Congress in the past, and I've been running for VP now for a while, but for president for a couple of years. So I have filed forms in the past, but I just decided I was, done with it. It's too tedious. It's not relevant. No one has ever asked me for information. But most importantly, I just don't think it's any of their business, right? If we want to disclose information to the public, that ought to be up to us. And if the public is pissed off because we refuse to disclose one thing or another, then it's up to the voters to hold us accountable. And, maybe you don't want to support someone who refuses to disclose certain types of information or frequently enough, right? But when I disclosed information years ago, nobody cared. Nobody looked, we had stuff on the website and so forth. Nobody cares. And so I've decided to draw this line. So the FEC is all pissed. They're threatening that the Department of Justice is going to sue me and so forth. And we'll see how that plays out.
Wow. And this does make me think a little bit about this too, that, you're a third party candidate, and, what a barrier that is to so many people who want to stand up and make a difference. The idea that there's all these complex laws that they may, or regulations too, that they may not be aware about. And then suddenly you're being hit with all these things. So it's like you try to stand up and, you don't have the machine of the Republican or Democrat Party behind you to, have lawyers and everything to do all this work for you. And they're, essentially, these are barriers, kind of almost like,
well, they can be. They
Yeah.
certainly can be. And you're right. We're not just a third party. We're the third party. But that doesn't mean that we've got $1 million and a raft of attorneys ready to file forms for us. The other thing that's really silly, in my view, is that, I'm not a particularly wealthy guy, right? If you looked at my financials, they would look like, most other Americans, right? I've got the house and a couple of little pensions from work in the past. By the way, thank you for your introduction. That was the nicest way of saying Mike is old I have ever heard, when you said he has a a lot of how did you put it? A lot of history, a long history. That was the nicest way of saying Mike is old I've ever heard. Yeah, I'm not old. I just have a lot of most history, right? More history than anybody else. He's not the oldest guy. He just has a lot of history. All right, that's interesting. But my financials are relatively, uninteresting. Whereas you compare that, I would be more interested in the background of someone like Kamala Harris, whose life has been completely in the public sector, or, and this one really bothers me, Joe Biden, whose total career has been in the public sector.
Yes.
And yet lives in a house in Delaware on the beach that must be worth $20 million if it's worth a nickel. I just don't understand how that works. You've seen the size of the house.
Yes.
It's on the water, best I can tell. Now, if it's not on the water, all bets are off. But that house strikes me as an order of magnitude more valuable than you would expect a retired senator to be able to afford.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you see all these people like, President Obama and others, they come into politics and, they have, relatively modest background, and suddenly they're, lifestyles of the rich and famous when they leave.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. When Obama was first filing his financials, it was, all of the wealth he had in the whole world was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was relatively normal. He had obviously saved his pennies and nickels, good for him. And now I think that the public would be absolutely astonished. I even, myself, as someone who has been around some of these knuckleheads for decades, I was absolutely gobsmacked to learn last year that Chelsea Clinton has something like $30 million. That just struck me as, I don't even, I think the word is weird.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's
sorry,
combined,
but
I think there's a little bit of a combined story there from what happens after these people in government. Not only do they figure out a lot of grift while they're there, but then they also inflate the dollar so much that all these numbers look a little
probably
more
true. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that Chelsea has done anything illegal. I'm not even suggesting your parents have done anything illegal. But the idea that you would be the child of a retired president or secretary of state, that you would all of a sudden have dozens of millions of dollars, I find that weird.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. I did want to touch on when you talked about history and us talking about how old you are relatively. We've done you a great service because we started out with Cicero, so you got nothing on him as far as.
Well, that's a good point. I'm the youngster in this conversation. I also appreciated how you said that I worked for the Bush administration without mentioning that it was George Herbert Walker Bush, which most of your viewers probably don't even know he existed, right? But W's father was the president of the United States. Yes, that's going. I worked for. He was my boss's boss's boss in 90, 91, 92. That's going back a while.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
I like that you have to have a disclaimer too. Which Bush? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some administrations are a little more embarrassing than others.
Yes.
Yeah, it all depends on your preference, I suppose.
Indeed. Yes.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's get into talking about the campaign. So, Leon, maybe you could bring up the page. So, here is the page for the campaign. It's votechaseoliver.com. As we mentioned, Mike is the vice presidential candidate, and we're going to ask a few questions about how that turnaround came into being, since when you came on before, you were running for president. so it's a great team, and I'm glad you're on the ticket. But it would be cool to find out just a little bit more of the inside story on that. But let's start first with a campaign video that Mike had about his Gold New Deal, so that you can find out, you can understand a little bit more about who Mike is and what he's about. I think this is a fantastic video, just kind of get a sense of some of the terrible things that are happening in our world and that we need to be a little more aware about. It's called Stop the Abuse. So can you play KOL 1, Leon?
This election is not going to be about small things.
It's not going to be about some court decision, a particular law, or what to do about some government agency.
This election is not going to be about a political candidate. It's not going to be about Donald Trump. It's not going to be about Joe Biden. Nor is this election going to be about me. This election is going to be about you. This election is going to be about your own vision for your own future, and whether that future is going to be driven by your own values or driven by someone else's values. There are people today in control of our government who impose a set of values that are different from yours, different from mine, different from those of most Americans. The values of this political class reflect an interest in power and control. These politicians maintain control by manipulating fear. Political parties have pit American against American, undermining our most cherished relationships, quite literally destroying families. The ever-increasing overreach of government has stripped us of our personhood, our individuality, and far too often, our very purpose. Our once thriving people, our culture, our nation, has been forced into an abusive relationship with a government that has gone absolutely mad with power.
I'm Mike ter Maat. I'm running for president to end the abuse, to build a new relationship between us and our government, to replace the old abusive relationship with what I call a gold New Deal.
In any abusive relationship, it can be difficult to see the signs. Signs like gaslighting, violence, wasted money, infidelity. Hope is not lost if we forge a relationship with our government that is, once again, based on our own values, to live and let live, to allow our fellow Americans to pursue happiness according to their own standards. It's time to stop fighting with each other and start fighting a political class that takes our money and disrespects our values. It's time for a gold New Deal.
As president, I will end U.S. involvement in foreign wars and stop sending our money and our young people overseas to fight in wars that profit the elite.
A gold New Deal means that I will regain our financial freedom by axing government regulation and spending, by dismantling a Federal Reserve system that undermines our standard of living. A gold New Deal means that I will reverse the weaponization of our justice system, stop abusive law enforcement practices by demanding accountability, and end a hopelessly counterproductive war on drugs. A gold New Deal means that I will put an end to the Orwellian surveillance state that offends our rights, break up the FBI that insults our values, and end the CIA that has caused worldwide embarrassment to us as Americans.
I'm Mike ter Maat, and all I'm asking is for you to stop putting up with the abuse. To learn more, visit goldnewdeal.org.
So yeah, that's a wonderful video, Mike, and I think it really captures a lot of the ills that are going on in the world. And you just kind of wish people would wake up and, and see what you guys are standing for, because I think yours and Chase's message is a really powerful one. So how is the campaign going? And I guess you guys are just a little over a month out now at this point.
Yeah, the election is soon to be upon us. The campaign is going about how you would expect it in certain ways, and in other ways, surprisingly well. I must say that the message is overwhelmingly positively received. The feedback that we get is virtually uniformly positive. It is just not true that there are examples out there of people who want more government in their lives. There are not people out there who think that our foreign policy is on the right track. There are not people out there who think that the way that we manage our currency and the value of the dollar is on the right track. That just isn't the case. I don't think that people are happy about the way COVID was managed. Some people, that's an area where there is some discord among Americans still. But for the vast majority of Americans, there's one way of being disappointed or another regarding the COVID regime. And so for all of these reasons, people are absolutely open to our message. They're also, and this is not a surprise, open to the idea of a third party because they're so frustrated with the Republican and Democratic parties. Now, having said that, it is true that most Americans believe still, notwithstanding everything that you and I have and will talk about, most Americans believe that they have to vote for a Republican or a Democrat in order to keep the other one out of power. And that's a real shame, because I do believe absolutely earnestly that if you are not voting for your values, you're wasting your vote. If you're not voting for the change that you want in the long run, you're just wasting your time. If you vote for a Republican, you're sending the signal that you want the Republican Party to continue doing what it's doing, that it's on the right track. And the same thing with the Democratic Party. Now, if that's how you feel, then super, knock yourself out, vote for the Democrat, vote for the Republican, if that's actually how you feel. I just don't think that it's true that most Americans feel that way. They're typically voting against something. Even if you were to look at, and objectively speaking, as you might imagine, I'm not a huge fan of either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and I don't mean that from the standpoint of them being idiots. I don't mean that they're unpatriotic. I just don't like their policies. But objectively speaking, I think you have to admit, if you were to look at the Donald Trump phenomenon, it is in no small part based on the Donald, by which he used to be known when he and I were both in New York, his is a protest campaign. He's a protest candidate. He's the kind of guy you vote for if you're just absolutely pissed off at the establishment, right? You're pissed off about wokeism. You're pissed off about the government and about the Democratic Party. I get all, and to a certain extent, even the Republican Party. And so I get all that. As a matter of fact, something about, some of that I admire, right? I admire the extent to which he is anti-establishment. I think that he probably has deep down underneath layers a certain libertarian instinct. He just doesn't, as a matter of policy, he doesn't allow himself to follow through on that for a variety of reasons. He doesn't understand economics very well. He's a good businessman. He understands business. He just doesn't understand economics or understand economic policy. And he is so brutally self-interested and such a demagogic populist that he just can't get there as far as embracing libertarian ideas, libertarian policy. You just can't get there.
And just to hammer on that too, because what we saw during COVID, even though Trump really didn't have the power to force lockdowns in most places, he was a big cheerleader of lockdowns initially. And he was also early one to say, hey, let's start pulling back too later on after a month or so. But he literally bragged about how well he was doing lockdowns and about how the United States is doing lockdowns better than Sweden, which is a terrible
It's a weird thing.
Yeah, but that goes to the populist, kind of non-principled on liberty type of thing. So even though he sort of got on the right track faster than Democrats later on, he was way off track right at the beginning.
He was way off track, and I would suggest that the reason he got back on track eventually is merely because Democrats were in power. Yeah, it makes you wonder if he had won that election, which he didn't, but if he had won that election and stayed in power, he very well may have pursued all of the same policies that the Biden administration had. And that is a real shame. And he is a populist who will follow what he thinks not only people want to hear, but what will position him for political victory in the future, come hell or high water. And, regarding Kamala Harris, I don't think that she's unpatriotic. I just think that she is really amazingly, particularly given the year 2024, and undereducated regarding how the world works, how economics works, how businesses work. I don't think she understands the fundamentals of taxation. I don't get the impression she understands the fundamentals of government budgeting even, and government finance. I just, the things she says suggest that she's hearing things and repeating things that are told to her. I blame to no small extent her staff. I think that she is very poorly staffed. You might not be, I suppose, shocked that you could rise to power as an attorney without understanding the first thing about economics. I mean, I find it surprising, but it's let's call that a push.
Our government is a testament to that.
Yeah, it does happen.
Kamala is from Kamala is from California, so we know all about her. Okay, I mean, and Mike, I have to say that's what you have said is a very nice way of saying she's an empty suit, but that's okay. Okay, so
yes. And maybe she understands, a lot about criminal justice, even if she and I don't see eye to eye on how the system should work. I presume that, she understands that system pretty well. But as far as economics and government finance, she is surrounded by people who are not serving her well. If I were a Democrat, I would want somebody like me, someone who had been a professional economist and was used to being in a classroom and teaching people who are, in some cases 18 and 19 years old for the freshman classes, which I think is really the level at which you need to start with a lot of politicians.
Yes.
Excuse me, as well as graduate school. But, she is not ready for a graduate school course in economics or in business. I think that she needs some very down-to-earth professional economists to explain how certain things work and the reasons why you want to go in certain directions with regard to policies. Even if you decided that you wanted...
We're right at the break, so before you finish that idea, if you're watching us on public access, you're going to have to catch the rest of the show online, and it should be a good one. We're going to talk some more about some of Kamala's issues on things like price gouging and stuff later on in the show. But anyways, back to the show, Mike. So you were saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you were a big believer in, the government spending a lot of money, or as you put it, her anti-price gouging stance, you would want her to understand it much, much better than what she evidences through her rhetoric so that she could sell it. She doesn't even do a good job of selling it. She doesn't seem to, she's completely defenseless when someone asks her about inflation. What do you want to do? We have all seen it, not just word salad, but the first time, what was it, 8 weeks ago, when she had that long rambling answer to the inflation question, was absolutely an embarrassment.
Yes.
And that's bad staff work.
Well, to that point too, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he is one of Biden's economic advisors. And he was caught in a word salad himself when he was recently asked to explain modern monetary theory and how, I can't remember exactly, sort of how the Fed works, I think was part of the question he was asked too. And he literally couldn't explain it all. It was just, darn it, I wish I had that clip for the show. That would have been great to show. But
I agree with you. And, it's a real shame because some of these people hang around in policy circles so long that they actually forget how the world really works. Yeah. If someone were to ask me about modern monetary theory, which is completely baseless, there is no theory or research to back it up. It is mostly really an assertion that the federal government of the United States, uniquely, no other government, no other organization could possibly pull this off, the theory goes. Well, that's true. No one else could pull this off, but neither can the federal government of the United States. But the theory is that because there is so much appetite for the US dollar and so much appetite for US debt in the world, that the United States can issue as much debt and allow to enter into circulation as much currency, as much money, US dollars, as we like, without ever running into a crunch in the sense of changing interest rates. We would just crowd out others from the market, and that does happen. But the theory continues to suggest that we'll never have to pay the piper, right? We'll never end up in a situation in which it really pinches on the American economy, because we'll just keep expanding and expanding. And of course, we know it's not true. As a matter of fact, I don't think, among real economists, I don't think I've met anyone who argues with me with the following point, and that is that on the track that we're on, the federal government of the United States is going to face a financial collapse before the middle of this century. And to the extent to which people give me pushback on that statement, it is, oh, no. We're not going to make it anywhere near 2050. That's the pushback I get, is that there are a lot of economists out there who don't think we have that much time.
When you say we don't have much time, I mean, in terms of what our government and our country or our institutions will collapse?
Yeah. The government is going to have a difficult time meeting its obligatory interest payments on debt at some point. I believe it has 2 or 3 decades left in it. But once the debt gets upwards of, 200, 250% of GDP, once you're carrying an amount of debt that is 2 or 3 times the underlying economy, the amount of interest on that is so enormous that it will take up such a large proportion. At some point, it'll take up most tax revenue, and then the government won't be able to meet its obligations on all of its mandatory spending, entitlement spending, Social Security payments, Medicaid, Medicare payments that it's obliged to make under an array of government pension systems. It won't be able to meet everything. And so it'll have to continue to borrow money at an accelerating pace, which will drive up interest rates, accelerating even worse the extent to which it has to spend and therefore borrow money. And so it gets into this spiral, and you don't see it coming. When corporations fail,
Mike,
sometimes you don't see it coming.
Let me introduce some numbers or visuals just so people can understand this. I was going to show this later in the show, but since we're on it right now, Leon, can you bring up the visual for the national debt over the last 100 years, just so people can see what we're talking about? So this is from Treasury, Department of Treasury, and you can see the purple graph here, how back in 1923, we were literally right around, it looks like less than $1 trillion in debt. Now we are at 30. Well, this only isn't quite up to date, I guess, because it's only to 2023. So it's $33 trillion. We're actually $35 trillion at this point in debt. So this thing is just getting away from us faster than you can see. And if you want to see what that kind of means in relative terms about how productive the country is, this is the CBO's chart on federal debt held by the public versus our gross domestic product. So you can see it's sort of productivity versus the debt. And you can see that, around 1900, that was a very small portion of, it's just, maybe 5 or 10% of GDP was debt. You get to World War II, something where the government is expected to have to borrow a lot to be a part of. That is, over 100% at that point. And then we didn't pay it off. We just got more productive. Is what the story is here. So we weren't really that responsible. And that's why the trend is going down. But you see, we've gotten back to those levels again. And it's scary as heck, because the CBO, our government, is literally telling us, hey, you fools, you're going off the cliff. And, because it's just showing we're going up, up, up.
That is exactly right. And we know that interest rates are cyclical, so everything is great when interest rates are relatively cheap. But at the high end, when rates are at, short-term interest rates are more like 5% than 3%, and the government has to refinance a great deal of that over 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If interest rates persist at a high level, it would be extremely expensive for the government to continue to meet its obligations. The reason this is so important is not because we believe the federal government will go out of business. In fact, there are plenty of people who would welcome that idea, right? It's not like this is an organization that's adding a lot of value to your life. The problem is that it would bring down the bond markets and likely bring down the functionality of the market, not only for bonds, but for the US dollar, which would undermine international trade. It would throw the entire world into a deep depression because financial markets just wouldn't any longer work very well. And this is a depression that would be very difficult to climb out of. So we're talking about a cataclysmic event that would make the depression in the 1930s look like child's play. We're talking about something that's very, very important. And this matters because it affects literally billions of people in very, very profound ways, about which they deserve better. Humanity deserves better than to have all of our productivity undermined by stupid decisions being made by people who don't give a darn in Washington, D.C. I think that we deserve better than that.
Well, and quite frankly, a lot of this is because of pandering. I mean, politicians really don't pay a price for promising us things and, promising that our children will essentially pay for our free ride today. Leon, I'm going to kind of take things out of order because I don't want us to run out of time on things. But with the Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we usually save to the end, but I'm going to bring that forward to now because that had to deal with a lot of economic issues in it. And it was actually a recent I guess a talk that Oprah had on, or excuse me, that Kamala had on Oprah, but also too that she'd been going along on the campaign trail, and some of her economic policies are just essentially promising more and more free stuff. And so I thought it'd be cool to hear some of Mike's thoughts on this. So
it's scary.
Well, can you bring up the visual, Leon, real quick? So this is just so you can kind of see. Here's an article from the New York Post, and it just talks about Kamala's price gouging backtrack is blatant gaslighting. So, I'm not quite sure, if she's trying to say she's, not, because clearly she has been talking about price gouging recently. But she was on.
She believes in price controls without realizing that this anti-gouging idea is really nothing more than price controls. It may be, a more politically correct way to express it. But the fundamental problem is that she seems to believe that inflation, higher costs, come because of decisions being made by corporations in order to boost profitability.
Right. Yes.
And the truth is that
Mike,
corporations are passing on costs.
Let me show people, because we do have a little video clip of Kamala saying this in her own words and how this plays with the public, because this is at a forum where there's people asking questions, and this is how Kamala is answering them. And they all like the answers, which is the scary part. But so Leon, there's two clips here. There's KNP1, where she first talks about price gouging, but then she throws in some of the other things she's for as well in her market basket here of unmarketable economics, I guess. I don't know. Leon, can you play KNP1?
We really would love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Yeah, first of all, thank you both for being here. And yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family, and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that. And there are a number of ways. One is bringing down the cost of everyday necessities, including groceries. So that's why I'm taking on, for example, price gouging. which is when, most companies and corporations are good, but for those bad ones, they take advantage of people, especially during a pandemic or extreme weather, and they end up jacking up prices, and there needs to be accountability and consequence for that. So I'm going to be taking on price gouging.
By the way, I had to speed that up too because she had a lot of word salad in there, a little bit. She also had some word salad in this other response that I actually had to cut out because there was just too much. But let me play this other part too, because this has the other things she wants to do beyond saying she wants price controls. So Leon, this KNP2.
Part of my plan is for first-time homeowners, buyers, to have a $25,000 down payment assistance to buy your first home. Part of my plan is to give startup small businesses a $50,000 tax deduction to start up their small business. Right now it's $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. Part of my plan is also to extend and expand the child tax credit to $6,000 so that you can, in the first year of your child's life, have the resources to be able to buy a crib and a car seat and clothes for your baby. All of this and more is part of what I plan to build, and I call it an opportunity economy.
So
Wow.
there you see, just a whole bunch of things. And by the way, that last part, I just wanted to say, she's saying, oh, we're going to give you back some of your money. So, because it's a tax credit, right? We're going to give you back some of your money so that you can afford to buy things. Which
sometimes the truth slips out, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, anyway,
it's really sad. This whole idea that, the reason that prices are high is because of corporate behavior is really pernicious, and for a couple of different reasons. One is it's just not true, right? It's just false. It's just in some sense it's a lie, and it's hard to accuse someone like Kamala Harris of lying to the public, because I really believe that she doesn't understand what she's talking about. But the other is that there is something ethical afoot here, suggesting that it's someone else's fault, that it's not a matter of government policy, that it's not directly under her control, because it is. The government spends too much money.
Yes.
That is a fundamental problem and raises costs, not only because it continues to tax us too much, but because it puts pressure on the Federal Reserve System to buy up this debt, creating inflation and undermining our ability to make ends meet. Now, it is a bit more complex than I would expect any politician to talk about, but we need to fundamentally change the way that our currency is managed by the Federal Reserve System. As you know, I'm a proponent of ending the Fed lock, stock, and barrel. But even if you didn't want to go that far, well, and as a matter of a first step, no matter what your long run goal is, as a matter of a first step, you need to take away the Fed's discretion to just allow money to be created willy-nilly. This is not a good way to run an economy, and we know that. I don't want to take away the Fed's independence of the executive branch of the federal government of the United States. We certainly don't want to politicize it. What I want to do is place more rules on it so even it doesn't have the discretion that it has now, because it has demonstrated that it is not good at this. And again, I believe the Fed is full of incredibly smart and very talented and very dedicated, very patriotic people. But the 100-year experiment has demonstrated that the Fed is just not good at either preserving the value of our currency. It allows far, far too much inflation. The idea that it targets 2% inflation is horrific. I understand there are political reasons why it does so, which are very complex. But even its 2% target, it can't meet. It's running at 3% inflation today and just decided to lower interest rates and pump more money into the economy, even though it can't get down to its own target rate of 2% inflation. It's just not good at this.
This is the crazy thing, right? This is almost like a centrally planned, almost kind of communist entity that's out there, this Federal Reserve, where it's saying we need to set the price of money. And that price that's a signal that's telling us the value of money that should come from the marketplace. It's trying to tell us about supply and demand and where goods would be better used by following price signals. And it's just horrifying that the government thinks it needs to.
It undermines all of that value to our economy of having prices fluctuate due to market forces. Today, you cannot economists do not typically discern a great deal of information from the overall price level, except the extent to which we're guessing that it's because of Fed policy. It's very difficult to suggest that prices are running up because the economy is overheating and the economy is doing well, or the price level is going down because we're headed into a recession. That's just not how it works. That whole price signaling mechanism is undermined by Fed behavior. What we need is a rule in place that governs the extent to which the Fed can create money. The Fed's job should be to target an amount of money in the system relative to our economy so that we're targeting 0% inflation, not targeting 2% inflation.
It certainly, if we need a Fed at all, but yes. I mean, if we're going to have a Fed, much better to.
And we don't. I mean, to your point, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York is a transactional entity that can handle the job of monitoring, allowing a certain amount of money to be created, buying and selling in the market to maintain that target, so that we target 0% inflation. We don't need a Federal Reserve System to set monetary policy. It's just completely unnecessary. And I understand, why it was done in the first place with all good intentions. It was horrible at it when it started. It has gotten much, much, much better, but still has proven it does not mitigate the boom bust cycle, and it does not preserve the value of our currency.
Mike, I don't want us to run out of time, and I did want to try and ask some stuff about sort of the how you became vice president instead of presidential candidate.
Chase Oliver got more votes than I did.
Yeah, you guys kind of made a deal, I guess. But I guess
no. I mean, it wasn't really a deal though. You run independently. Our party has an open convention, unlike the Republican and Democratic parties that have their primary votes in advance of the convention. Our convention is open, which is to say people can pick whoever they want. I got knocked out when, we had winnowed it down to just 3 candidates, and Chase, offered me the chance to run as his VP. I said, sure. My initial offer was for Chase to form a ticket with the other candidate, Michael Rechtenwald, a terrific guy who also had more votes than I did. I had the 3rd largest number of votes. My suggestion was for them to form a ticket. They declined to do so for reasons that they would have to, to justify, not me. They make the decisions that they want to make. And so I decided to accept Chase's offer to form a ticket with him. And he got more votes than I did, or Michael Rechtenwald did. And so that's how he became the presidential nominee. And then there had to be a vote all over again to decide who the vice presidential nominee would be. And I got more votes than the other VP candidates did for that role. And so we were put together as a ticket.
Yeah. So when you say you guys you run for the position independently, when you are a ticket though, your campaign, I assume, are coordinated, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. Once the ticket is formed, it is like with the other parties. Legally, you only have one financial committee, one campaign through which all of the funds are received and spent. It is legally one campaign. We do coordinate everything that we do. Chase and I work together very, very closely. We share staff. So it is one unified campaign.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I guess I did want to. There's probably a lot of fascinating things we could dive into here. I certainly wanted to, but I don't want to run out of time with you on the other things.
It's all right. Go ahead.
So, I guess so. Let's jump to the AI story, I guess, that we wanted to get to, because I did want to touch on this because we talked with you about Lisa the last time. So just to give us a sense, how much time do you have? Do you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What's your hard cutoff here?
Yeah, I got a good 10 minutes. Let's go.
Okay, so real quick, Leon, we have a story here in California where Gavin Newsom wanted to, I guess, shut off. They just signed a law to essentially limit deep fakes, and so maybe you can bring up the visual here. This is Gavin Newsom signs this bill essentially to limit deepfakes before the election. And so this is kind of a crazy thing, because this is an issue where, if you don't know what a deepfake is, it's something where it makes it look like somebody is saying or doing something online, and they're not really doing it. It's just a computer putting it together. And to give you an example, we had Chase Oliver on recently, and we had kind of a Star Trek theme. And so I kind of wanted to give just a real easy example of that. And so here was a picture of Kirk and McCoy and Spock. And we had a Star Trek theme just because Chase is a Star Trek fan. So we wanted to talk about that. But we did our own little deep fake on here where it doesn't really have the talking, but we use this little program here called Face Swap. And so we managed to make our own image of essentially Chase Oliver as Captain Kirk and Mike ter Maat as Dr. McCoy here on the bridge.
Right.
And of course, we just added the quote in here. He didn't really say this. This is kind of a deep fake, right? But he said, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a libertarian, not an authoritarian populist politician willing to say anything." as Chase and Mike boldly go where no political leaders have gone before. So it's
good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and you're saying that Gavin believes that this should be illegal.
Yes.
Gavin believes that this should be illegal, and I guess he's worried that it'll give disinformation. And we did have a video. Well, let's show that. Maybe if we can't get to the other stuff, we'll just save that for another show. So, Leon, it's KOL2. This is a quick little video. We can't actually show the deep fake itself, because since it's related to the election, we're in California and maybe we could be prosecuted. So I don't know, but we'll show the little news clip right around it. So this is KOL2, Leon.
The law signed by Newsom makes it illegal to create and distribute AI-manipulated political content 120 days before and 60 days after Election Day. It also allows courts to stop distribution of the materials and impose civil penalties. The legislation aims to preserve election integrity and prevent AI from spreading disinformation. Newsom said, "I just signed a bill to make this illegal in the state of California. You can no longer knowingly distribute an ad or other election communications that contain materially deceptive content, including deepfakes." But Elon Musk, owner of X and freedom of speech proponent, has lashed out at the governor banning the ad, saying, "The governor of California just made this parody video illegal in violation of the Constitution of the United States. Would be a shame if it went viral." In a hilarious twist of fate, shortly after Gavin Newsom signed the bill, the Kamala Harris parody ad went viral.
So, as you can see, they tried to do a law to essentially limit our ability to, and this is a form of speech. This is one of the things we kind of touched on with Chase Oliver when he was on the show too. Is this a speech-related issue or not? And clearly, this is a form of speech. It appears, and the government is literally saying, well, if we don't like the speech before an election, we can tell you what's good speech and bad speech, and we'll just not allow it. What do you think about this? To me, this seems like a horrible, overstep by government.
Of course it is. And look, it's one step more complicated than that. And so I want to give Newsom his due. But yes, in general, certainly we don't want to undermine people's rights to say whatever they want, even if it's not true. We don't want to undermine people's ability to engage in parody, humor, and to the extent to which something turns out to be not true, you certainly don't want the executive branch of the state of California being the arbiter, right, of deciding what it is that should be allowed online and what should not be. And so all of that is true. On the other hand, there is another issue, and I don't want to act as though we are not aware of it or sensitive to it. Fraud is a crime. Fraud should be a crime. People have a right to come together in communities and form a criminal justice system, a criminal code, and decide how they want that to be enforced. And in what cases people, we have long recognized that people have a right to form communities to do exactly this. As libertarians, we all believe that the government should do precious little. But one of the things that it should do is keep our liberty safe to protect us. And sometimes that means protecting us from the government. Sometimes that means protecting us from outside forces. It does not mean maintaining a military that could wage war against the rest of the world combined and win twice over. That's a whole nother show. But it does mean, especially on a local level, that we want, government to enforce certain rules of conduct. And one of those is we don't like to be defrauded, right? So there is an issue with AI that is slightly different than just a politician saying something dopey. And that is that AI has the ability to lead you to believe that somebody actually said something that they didn't say. In other words, it's not just a matter of the content, right? It's a matter of who said it. And they have the ability to show you a video of me saying, I think communism is terrific. We should all turn into socialists. And, they could put that video in the context of a quiet conversation that was off mic and make it sound like that's how I really felt. That's fraud, right? Now, personally, I believe that the way that should be handled is in the court system, because fraud is already illegal. You don't need new laws to say that fraud should be illegal. And so I believe that should be handled in the court system, and that we need ways of making the public able to gain access to courts. In many cases, that's class action, but you want people to be able to gain standing in court and prosecute people for fraudulent activity. I get that. And I don't want to act like, we're not aware that of the deep fake phenomenon, because there is an element of fraud there that we're all worried about. Would I have handled it the way that Newsom is? No. But, that's not a new statement for me to say I wouldn't handle things the way that he is.
And quite frankly, I mean, this is something where it just seems like if you can say that, hey, look, have a disclaimer that says this is parody or this is a comedy. I mean, we've watched Saturday Night Live and others skewer, for certainly Republicans much more often than Democrats in the past.
Right.
And yet people, we assume they're smart enough to understand this is comedy. And maybe the way they vote, maybe they weren't smart enough to see. I don't know. But clearly, this is something where we've said it's okay in the past if you do parodies. Clearly, the deep fake is a little more, makes it look a little more real. But as long as there's some way to indicate that, hey, look, this is a parody, this is a joke, and like Babylon.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And there is an array of ways of saying that. And sometimes we have relied in the past on people getting the joke. I understand why people are worried. They're afraid that people won't get the joke when they see. And to be fair, we have seen politicians say stuff that really is so dumb that what? The first time you hear
controls.
Yeah, but the first time you hear Kamala Harris, I mean, this is 2024. If a politician who represents the Democratic Party says that she's against price gouging as an answer to inflationary pressure, your first reaction should be, did she really, what? Is that a deep fake? Is that AI? Did the Republicans make her say that? I get it that, it's going to become increasingly difficult to discern the difference. I like your idea that, maybe a little disclaimer at the bottom, but, that means that we're going to have to have to start asking Kamala to run on her ads. Yeah, I really mean this stupid thing.
Yeah.
It really is me. That's right. I know this is stupid, but I really meant it.
Yeah, but to me though, I mean, even if we could have some of these deep fakes, and we could make me or you or somebody say something that we really didn't say, and that kind of stuff, and the AI can make it look so real. But don't you think the marketplace of ideas, where things can be discussed and discerned, is a far more powerful tool than any disclaimer that we could put on our videos? I mean, and besides, if somebody in a political campaign who's going to put a disclaimer on this.
And just to add to what Leon said, remember what the Biden administration tried to do when videos came out showing Joe Biden not fully there all of the time. They said these are cheap fakes, essentially trying to say they accuse everybody of deep fakes. It can go the other way too, where we can be accused of showing real video and somebody says you faked that. And how would you?
Well, this is what's going on in North Carolina right now, is that there's we don't need to bring them up by name we don't need to get into it, but I think a lot of people are aware that there's someone running for governor in North Carolina representing the Republican Party who's been accused of a lot of weird things. I don't have any independent way to verify it's either true or it's not true, but he is claiming, and I think to a lot of people it sounds dubious, but he's claiming that, AI was involved and it wasn't him and blah, 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 blah. So you're right. It is going to cut both ways.
Well, exactly. Mike, we're just about out of time. And I did want to say one thing real quick. Leon, can you bring this visual up real quick? So we don't have time to get into the game we were going to play with you on the AI, but hopefully we can have you on again and talk about that in the future, because I think it's really great that you guys are developing libertarian AI out there to combat the other stuff. So just for people, if they want to go check it out, it's called libertarianintelligence.org. And we can go and you can just ask it questions and probably get a lot of Mike's ideas just out of that, because it essentially gives you the libertarian answer to most of your political questions. So I think it's a really great tool out there for people. And
it's very fun. It's a combination of a toy and a tool. It's a good tool because you can learn about libertarianism and you can learn about public policy generally. And it's a toy too. If you're already a libertarian, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So you can just ask it questions, type it in like you would any other chat box, and it'll spit back answers at you. And it's pretty agile. But we don't have, unfortunately, time. I want to let you go when you wanted to, but let me bring back the page. So it's votechaseoliver.com. That's where you can go find out more about Mike's and Chase's ideas as they go forward and help support them in the cause, or find out how you can help them there. Because really, their ideas are far and away better than everybody else's ideas out there. So, and it's just a shame that you guys are out there saying it and people are going for the, what almost, like you said, seems like parody out there, but that's reality. That's what people seem to be backing. So it is
something that in 2024, you'd see both presidential candidates, completely disregarding the amount of money that the government is spending, completely disregarding the fundamental reasons why we have so much inflation, both backing the idea of tariffs and protectionism. It's a weird thing in 2024. I think most of us thought we put a stake in the heart of protectionism 100 years ago. It's just bad ideas that keep coming around. And, one thing that we'll have to talk about in some future show is that we have a foreign policy today representing Americans that is propagated by the federal government of the United States that does not represent our interests. It does not represent our values, does not keep us safer, does not make us rich and happy and help us engage in foreign trade. It's a mess. And neither one of the major party candidates is talking about it.
Indeed, that's true. Yes.
Well, thanks so much, Chase, for coming on the show.
Yes.
And
Mike,
best of luck to you. Sorry, no, Mike.
Well, Chase is here with us in spirit. Everyone check out votechaseoliver.com. Yes, you can go to MikeTerMaat.com too, if you can spell it, and learn a whole lot. It's a great joy to be with you guys today. I look forward to next time.
Awesome.
Indeed.
And by the way, if you're watching us out there, you see Mike and Chase running here, and you've seen people doing all kinds of, in fact, you even see Mike doing this libertarian chat box. I mean, so there's all kinds of ways you can stand up for liberty.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.